Right, so the BBC are imploding today and only have themselves to blame for the heavy-handed and blatantly political stance they've taken over Gary Lineker's tweets, and that isn't even the half of it. It has now been revealed that Gary stepping down from today's match of the day was really about him being told, if we can't moderate your tweets, you're not going on air. The BBC demanded that they have a say, that they have an agreed and clear position over Lineker's personal social media and are hiding behind the excuse of impartiality to do so. You work for the BBC, therefore you must kowtow to their version of impartiality. It seems what passes for it, which is actually anything but impartial. The BBC had no problem with Lineker criticising Qatar's human rights record during the recent World Cup. The BBC had no problem with Lineker advising the Labour Party to bin Corbyn a few years back to show his political opinions have never caused the BBC ire previously. So the double standards now that Gary has criticised the Tories and their racist, fascist, stop the boats policy, the language of it that's been used, is obvious to see, and more obvious still with the display of solidarity that's been shown and continued ever since. As news broke of what the BBC had done, other Match of the Day presenters ruled themselves out of turning up for work as well. Ian Wright, Alan Shearer, Alex Scott, Micah Richards, Jermaine Jenas all took to social media to send out their obvious position of solidarity with Lineker. It tickled me no end to see this show of collectivism, since only the BBC could have managed to make a group of rather wealthy men all decide to go on strike. It didn't stop there, though. Hashtags I'm with Gary and I stand with Gary rapidly trended across multiple social media platforms. People pledging to boycott watching today's Match of the Day. The commentators such as Steve Wilson, Simon Brotherton, Conor McNamara and Robin Cowan have all said they aren't going to turn up either, and if the bosses want commentary, they can use the world feed instead. Even players have weighed in on this, having taken advice from the Professional Footballers Association over whether they can refuse any media duties they might have regarding the BBC. The Beeb have ended up forced to declare this week's Match of the Day to basically be a highlight show. Today's Football Focus was cancelled as well, as presenters Alex Scott and Kelly Summers, along with their pundits, refused to turn up for work. Radio 5 Live sports coverage was cancelled after their presenter Mark Chapman and pundit Dion Dublin have also refused to turn up. And also the Final Score programme host Mark Webber, as I was writing this morning, pulled out of that show too, effectively cancelling it, citing that as freelancers, paid per game as all of these sports presenters, to my understanding, are, they're all making a salary sacrifice here. And he went further by saying that he can't stand by and see a colleague unsupported like this for a personal opinion which did not break BBC editorial guidelines. Solidarity and collectivism in effect. Don't you just love to see it? Is it a new concept to you, perhaps, imagining what it might be like to see this kind of behaviour in your own workplace? Join a trade union then. You'll be surprised what it does. Good luck to the BBC competing with other channels for sport this weekend. Anyway, Webber's point about editorial guidelines is relevant, though. Here's the passage relevant to Lineker from that guidance. It says on the issue of impartiality that the risk is greater where the public expressions of opinion overlap with the area of an individual's work. The risk is lower where an individual is expressing views publicly on an unrelated area. For example, a sports or science presenter expressing views on politics or the arts. Is that not exactly what Gary Lineker did? In which case Webber is absolutely right, and the shows of solidarity on displays for him are entirely justified. It is a self-inflicted example of sheer idiocy by the BBC. But as I said earlier, this wasn't the half of it. They've come after national treasure David Attenborough now as well. And again, it's because the BBC is afraid of offending the Tories. So impartiality has nothing to do with any of this. The complete opposite is actually the case. Attenborough's latest nature programme, called Saving Our Wild Isles, has been commissioned by the World Wildlife Fund and the RSPB, so part funded by environmental charities. Attenborough has for a long time wanted to do a show highlighting the UK's ecology, apparently, and this was his opportunity to do just that, covering not only what we have, but especially what we've lost, the decline of wildlife and habitats due to climate change. What possible problem could the BBC have with that? Well, the backbenchers of the Tory party are lined with climate change deniers, and the BBC is afraid of offending them if they imply their government might somehow be at fault over that. They're literally filling our rivers and streams with shit, but the BBC, in its cowardice, has decided this programme will go onto its iPlayer platform only. None of its main channels will air it. Effectively, that means working to ensure fewer people see it as a way of placating the Tories. It will be airing a 5-part programme it commissioned, however, called Wild Isles. There's an excuse to cause confusion. Saving Our Wild Isles versus Wild Isles. No doubt that'll be edited to within an inch of its life into a Tory-friendly output. But here's the thing, though. The confusion here is a consequence of a BBC kiss some Tory arse fudging, because the series was actually supposed to be 6 episodes long, and really it is just one episode of this that has been dealt with in this way. The BBC accepted charity money to make this series. The RSPB and the WWF coughed up to highlight the plight of our British ecology across 6 programmes, and the BBC has decided to hide mention of that by removing one offending episode to its online platform. What an insult. All because it fears Tory repercussions and no doubt those very Tory-centric farming and hunting lobbies. So rest assured, no sign of dogs tearing up the environment, chasing down foxes illegally, or any mention of bee-killing pesticides are likely to be mainstreamed here. Maybe on iPlayer, though. In response to all of this, the BBC's Director General, Tim Davie, has pledged to take a tougher stance on impartiality. He can start by resigning then, since Davie once stood for the Conservative Party to be a Hammersmith and Fulham councillor. This is just the tip of the iceberg for the BBC's impartiality problems behind the scenes, though, because by the very nature of the people running it, it is never going to be impartial. Recently, we've heard the news of how Tory party donor Richard Sharp helped arrange a loan for Boris Johnson, but didn't want linking to it too much because he was running to be the BBC's new chairman. He got the gig. That he's given some 400,000 to the Conservative Party as a donor should have ruled him out on the grounds of impartiality immediately, though. But of course it didn't. When even nature programme presenters and football presenters aren't safe from the politics police at the BBC, what hope is there for the ones actually involved in news then, especially with someone like Robbie Gibb in the fold? Gibb used to be in charge of much of the news output programmes like Politics Live and the Andrew Marr Show before he left the BBC to become Theresa May's head of communications when she became Prime Minister. It shouldn't be a surprise he was a Tory given much of the BBC politics output at the time. But when his own brother Nick Gibb is a sitting Tory MP, it's pretty blatant, and going to number 10 under May just confirmed that. Of course, when her reign ended, he went and helped set up GB News before ending up leaving that to return to the BBC, ending up on the BBC's board. Impartiality, that's gone out the window years ago. You literally have a former Tory communications chief on the BBC board now. Emily Maitlis, formerly of Newsnight and herself the subject of several accusations of impartiality issues during her time there, now having left the BBC, called Gibb recently an active agent for the Conservative Party. It's really hard to argue otherwise, isn't it? How about the most high-profile politics presenter at the BBC, Andrew Neil? Have you ever checked his Twitter feed? Would you call his comments impartial? Has he ever been admonished like Attenborough's programme and Lineker have? Don't be silly. The fact he happens to have been chairman of the Hard Right Spectator and was once upon a time chairman of the Glasgow University Federation of Conservative Students should have been an issue, though. He literally left university to work for the Conservative Party in the 1970s. Oh, he's also quite well known for his climate scepticism too. I'm sure there's no reason for the BBC to impartially deal with that, though, eh? How about Nick Robinson, another former young Conservative there as well? Fiona Bruce already showing her advocation for the BBC's impartiality credentials by flying in to defend the wife-beating allegations against Boris Johnson's father on Question Time just this week. She's married to an advertising exec who has done political messaging for the Tory party. The Matt Hancock leaked WhatsApp showed Dominic Cummings urging anything they wanted to put out to help their narrative be leaked to the likes of Laura Koonsberg, now a mainstream BBC presenter. George Osborne, the former Tory Chancellor and architect of austerity, was once linked with that BBC chairman job himself, though one of his schoolmates, James Harding, got appointed head of news at the BBC during Osborne's time in government. The list just keeps going on. And then, of course, there are the presenters who have said things on social media as well that would be clear breaches of impartiality, but who got away with it because they were basically attacking the left. Jeremy Clarkson continued working on Top Gear for 5 years after calling for striking workers to be shot. Alan Sugar posted a meme of Jeremy Corbyn sat next to Adolf Hitler. No doubt you can think of more. I'm not going to dwell on this bit any further, though you can let me know if any more that come up and come into your mind on the comments. The BBC is not, and actually never has been, an impartial entity, has always been beholden, by and large, to the government of the day due to how it is funded. It is not truly independent and is a state broadcaster in effect. And this Tory government of the last 13 years, as hard right as any we've ever known, has stuffed it repeatedly with people acting in their interests and not ours, despite our obligation via the TV licence to fund them. And their obligation as a free and fearless press free of bias, however, has been an abject failure in return. I have refused point blank to watch the BBC since 2019 out of principle. I pick up the odd online news article as part of researching videos like this one, but I feel I'd get as much accurate and impartial news reporting from one of their news shows as I would from watching Mr. Bloody Tumble. The BBC deserves every bit of the mess it is now in, because it has exposed all of this, that many of us who do research in the political world and do political reporting independently have known about all this for a long time. This has now all been exposed to a wider audience now, coming after Gary Lineker and the work of David Attenborough as they have, and it's not before time. For heaven's sake, do yourselves a favour and turn the channel over. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this vid, please do hit like and subscribe, leave a comment, and hit the notification bell too so you don't miss the next one. Also, look out for me on social media and other interesting stuff, of course, by clicking on that Linktree link in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Cheers, folks.